welcome to Business Line. Europe is on high security alert. Since the attacks in Paris on the 13th of November, several countries have increased their threat level. During this short period of time, Europeans have had to get used to the new reality when a European capital could stay paralysed for a few days in a row, with the city metro and schools shut down, an unprecedented case. The region's governments say they're fearing an attack similar to the one in Paris. In its initial budget planning for this year, the Belgian government had considered a cut in the security budget. After Charlie Hebdo, it unblocked extra money, particularly for personnel, increasing the budget by a quarter. This week, the people of Brussels probably saw more soldiers than ever before.
Police tape still blocks streets in Brussels as the city remains on high alert this Tuesday after the Belgian Prime Minister cited a serious and imminent threat that justifies keeping the highest level alert operational for at least another week. It's really hard to live in this situation. I've never seen anything like this in my entire 56 years. I keep telling myself that terrorists got what they wanted. They wanted us to panic all the time, and that's just what's happening. It seems to me they've won. Public transport remains severely curtailed, although this will progressively come back on service from Wednesday, which should bring some life back onto the eerily quiet streets of Europe's administrative capital. Schools will also reopen on Wednesday, bringing some relief to working parents and restoring some normality after 4 days of extraordinary scenes.
The extraordinary security measures seen throughout Europe over the last 2 weeks won't be over anytime soon. Therefore, many countries announced the plans to mobilise additional personnel, which should provide additional security, although it will require additional expenses. Of course, no country would ever try to save money on safety should there be a threat. But the thing is, many members of the European Union simply don't have a rainy day fund. Over the last decade, countries have been cutting defence and security budgets. France's spending decreased by around 20% over the last 25 years. Its 2015 defence budget stands at around 31.4 billion euros. After the attacks in Paris, President Hollande said the country was at war and announced an increase in personnel of at least 17,000 people. What's known for the moment is that the spending will increase by 3.8 billion euros over the next 4 years. Defence cuts have been cancelled until then. Paris warned the European Commission it might not be able to respect the deficit target of 3%. Pierre Moscovici said France's security spending should get special treatment. An interesting thing, these measures could actually support the recovery, at least in the job market. The number of daily applications received by France's armed forces has tripled since the attacks in Paris, from an average of 500 to about 1,500. Now, France's defence budget is the second largest in the European Union after the UK, where London just announced its plans to increase spending.
David Cameron has announced a massive boost to Britain's defence budget in the wake of the Paris attacks. Speaking after visiting the French capital, the British Prime Minister said he plans to increase spending by some 14 billion euros and create a 10,000-strong rapid reaction force ready to deploy across the world.
We will invest more than £178 billion in buying and maintaining equipment over the next decade, including doubling our investment in equipment to support our special forces. And we'll also increase the size of our deployable armed forces. The Conflict Stability and Security Fund will grow to over £1.3 billion a year by the end of this Parliament. And we'll also create a new £1.3 billion Prosperity Fund to drive forward our aim of promoting global prosperity and good governance.
But the review also requires the Defence Ministry to cut civilian staff by 30% to help keep the government's budget in check.
If France is given special treatment under EU budget deficit rules, then the same should apply for Italy, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi said. Rome's draft budget, which must be passed by Parliament by the end of the year, raises spending on anti-terrorism security measures by 70 million euros in 2016. Government officials say they are considering adding 120 million euros or more. Last year, 28 nations that comprise the North Atlantic Treaty Organization agreed that each member's defense spending should total at least 2% of that nation's GDP. But only 5 NATO members are likely to hit that threshold this year. The most generous member is the United States. Among the European Union, there are just 4 states. You might be surprised. Estonia, the UK, Poland, and finally the European winner, Greece, with 2.4% of GDP. While governments are recalculating their budgets, trying to relocate money, the terrorist organizations seem to have no problem with financing. And that is another important issue to tackle. Causing a major threat, they also benefit from the Western financial system.
French Finance Minister Michel Sapin has announced new national measures to toughen laws on financing terrorism. The initiative will put tighter restrictions on cash transactions and transfers. France will also ask for a new EU directive on money laundering and terrorist financing to be pushed through at a swifter pace. Speaking specifically about France, he said, "We're going to be supervising more strictly the use of prepaid cash point cards, which were used in the November the 13th attacks, in order to reduce the anonymity in their use. Next, we will extend France's national security arrangement from the freezing of terrorist assets to real estate investments and cars." New warnings will be issued to the banking industry, putting fresh emphasis on its monitoring duties. Sapin stressed that other governments must also do their part and called for the Financial Action Task Force's February report to specifically identify countries not working hard enough to clamp down on the financing of terrorism.
Last week, Giacomo told you how social media help people in times of crisis. This week, with the events in Brussels, we'll see how people wanted to do something about social media. To quote JFK, ask not what Twitter can do for you, ask what you can do for Twitter. This is it. This is IT.
What happened in Brussels this weekend showed how web users are determined to respond to terrorists. What is the best reaction to violence and hatred? Simple. Photos of funny kitties. Let's try recounting the events. On Sunday, the Belgian capital was in full lockdown mode. Subways, schools and shopping centers were closed. That evening, before a raid which later ended with 16 arrests, Defense Minister Steven Van de Putte and the police asked people not to tweet anything about the operation. They were afraid that the information could tip off their targets. Web users answered the call in a very unique way. To confuse terrorists, they flooded the hashtag Brussels lockdown with photos of cats. According to the AFP, it all started with Dutch cameraman Hugo Jansen posting, "Instead of tweets about police activity in Brussels, here's a picture of our cat Mozart." After that, people went wild, even resorting to memes and Photoshop pics in a race to see who could post the cutest cat. Francophone newspaper Le Soir even went so far as to put a kitty on its homepage. Now, believe it or not, this whole operation was considered a success. The Federal Prosecutor's Office thanked users of social media. And on Monday, the Belgian police even tweeted something to thank their furry little friends. "For those who supported us, help yourself." That was it. That was IT.
That was it for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.